One thing that was always really tough for me was it was tough putting the story into perspective, and I don't think I still have. But I mean, I remember even recounting the story, whether it's here in this interview or whether it's to friends or family members, colleagues, whomever. I always, when I think of the listener and the audience, and I put myself in their shoes, it's such an unbelievable story that if I were to hear it, I wouldn't think that it had happened. I think one thing that I've learned from this scenario is that things are never black and white. It's never as simple as he's good, he's bad, she's good, she's bad. There's so many layers to people and to what drives them and what drives their life and what they go through on a day-to-day basis. That these situations are never easy to understand by any means. They're never easy to react to. Would have been early January of 2007. So between the 10th and 12th of January, it would have been just the middle of winter, and just heading home to pick up some skates and then go ice skating. So I was with my mother, who was driving, and my girlfriend at the time, who we just kind of pick her up from her house. She just lived about a 10-minute drive away, 10 to 15-minute drive away. I would have done it myself. I've never been a driver. I had, epilepsy issues in the past, and wasn't authorized to drive. So I tended to rely on my mother a lot or my father or my brother a lot for some of those things. So on that particular day, my mother had been kind enough to to drive me over to pick up my girlfriend, bring her back, and then we were going to have a family outing, skating on a Sunday afternoon. We'd just been coming back in to the West Hill area of Hamilton, and we were driving towards my house, and probably about 2 blocks from where I live, we were driving along at about 50 kilometers an hour, and we saw a van pulling out of a driveway, which common occurrence whenever you're driving through any neighborhood. You see a lot of cars moving to and fro, but we saw a van pull out of a driveway and approach us in our own lane, which is when the confusion and the shock began. And initially, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, tend not to think that people are out on the streets driving under the influence or driving recklessly, especially on a Sunday. But we saw this van approaching, and he was in our lane, and the two of us in the front, my mother and myself, who had the clearest view, just said, "Oh well, what the hell is this guy doing? He must have had a few early drinks, or he must be confused. He must be a new driver or an elderly driver who's a little bit confused. So let's just pull over and let's get out of his way and let him pass." We pull over, and intuitively our expectation is for him to just pass us, and we pull over, and my mother keeps the car in neutral or idling, and we're right up next to the curb, and then our level of shock and surprise amplifies when we see him realign his minivan with our car. And that's when his velocity just starts to increase. He starts to accelerate, and he's approaching us. It's one of those situations where you see something happening before you, but it's so inexplicable and so unexpected that your instincts are sometimes thrown off. He picked up his speed, and I would say that when he hit us, he was at about 75 kilometers an hour, 75 to 80. And just smashed into our car. It was our car that absorbed most of the impact. His van had taken quite a beating as well, and just as we were startled and shaken up in our car, we have no idea what's just happened, and we see him reverse and then accelerate again and just rip down the road and drive off. And that's when all hell broke loose in her car. A lot of emotions, started to flare. A lot of confusion continued to build. And the last thing you expect in that setting, especially, is for someone just to attempt to cause you severe harm out of no, out of no sense of logic. I mean, you have no connection to this person, and they just, they attempt to severely impact your life for reasons that you can't explain, or you'll never know. The same individual had, after he drove off from the scene of our crash, he tried the same thing with another car, or another minivan, and that minivan tried to get out of his way, and he T-boned them, and it was a young family, a lot of 2 or 3 children in the back. After his van had been totaled in his second crash, he tried to walk away, and several passersby tackled him, made a citizen's arrest. I mean, in this kind of incident, the police will never explain to you the report of the arrest of a culprit if someone tries to inflict harm on you. There are certain details they never release. I harbored a lot of resentment, a lot of hate towards this man, but I wish the worst possible things upon this man. For me, at times it became an obsession, just wondering what had gone through this man's mind, what had driven him to do this. And it was very tough for me, was that wishing the worst possible things upon this person, wishing harm upon them, wishing death upon them. Just the sense of confusion and shock that still exists over that situation is something that it continues to prevent me from dealing with it intuitively. Whereas you think, maybe someone intuitively, if someone does that to them, some of the gut reactions will be to try to find this person, find out more about them, see if you can track them down. If you're a vengeful person, see if you can track them down and harm them, whatever it is. Pressing charges was always something that my family was against, so that we didn't look into that very much beyond inquiring into what the process would have been. I really wanted to press charges. We didn't. Yeah, in terms of what would be the most expected reactions of a victim coming out of that situation, I don't think that I followed that course of events, just because it was a confusing situation, and I still kind of struggle to believe that it even happened. For me, it went in waves. It was waves of apathy and disbelief towards waves of obsession. And so personally, I don't know if suffering for myself is the right word. There are times that were really difficult and really, really testing emotionally. You see this kind of behavior in movies. You hear stories and you never want to believe them, but I lived it, and I still don't believe it. And so maybe part of the obsession is trying to make sense of it and figure out how this unfolded. Just thinking about the individual, what kind of individual was that? What kind of individual does that? What can give someone such hatred and such rage to do that? And I know, and I've said in this interview, that it's never as simple as that. So part of it was my immaturity at the time too, trying to make it a black and white issue. But much of what I obsessed over was just who is this individual? Where are they? And at times I thought, I really want to find this person. I really want to find them and hurt them. And a lot of it was obsession, overthinking, that I want to equalize things. As much as you can tell yourself that you don't want to judge someone for doing something, and as much as it may not be the right thing to judge someone or to wish things upon them, sometimes your instincts lead you towards that. Sometimes your survival instincts lead you towards that. Beyond any logic that can tell you that you have to empathize with someone, you have to understand their life and understand what they've gone through. It was just extreme anger, extreme sadness, extreme confusion, just waves of different emotions coming out and sometimes clashing with each other. And it's difficult, and as much as I want to be more specific about some of these things, it's hard because I still don't really know what happened. I still don't really know. I mean, I know the facts around the crash, but I don't know. I don't know what happened in his mind. I don't know what happened to us, I can't just, it's hard to come up with words and statements to describe it because it's something that I can't compare anything else to. Most people underestimate how much of an impact you can make on someone else with any given decision you make. And so many times I look back at this thinking like, who the fuck is this guy? If I do ever come across this guy, I want to break his neck. I don't know what drives someone to do that. And over time, after looking at this situation in hindsight and then hearing about his passing, I just know that one bad mood, one bad action can severely impact someone else. And I look back and I empathize with this guy and I pray for him and I pray for his family. But I think to myself, and I don't know if it was one bad day, one bad year, or one bad lifespan for him, but one spell behind the wheel, one incident behind the wheel, and you have the capacity to take somebody's life. You have the capacity to ruin or severely alter somebody's life. And people sometimes underestimate that, whether it's behind the wheel of a car, whether it's at the office, whether it's anywhere, walking down the street. You can severely impact your own life or someone else's with one adverse decision. Whether it's getting distracted with your phone when you're behind the wheel and getting into oncoming traffic and killing someone or killing yourself. Whether it's stepping off the sidewalk at the wrong time when you're not paying attention and getting hit by a bus. Whether it's saying the wrong thing to someone in a social setting that sets them off. Whether it's interpreting something the wrong way and basing a relationship that you have on a misunderstanding. There's so many things, there's so many elements of life that people underestimate, and there's so many things that impact our existence and our behavior that I've learned through the situation to be more careful and to be more observant, not only of myself but of others, and to watch the actions of others. Because if I look back and if I'd been behind the wheel of that car instead of my mother, I think I may have tried to get out of the way and turn to the left, and that van may have T-boned that car and killed whoever was riding shotgun if it hadn't been me. If I'd been behind the wheel, it could have been different. And there's so many details in life that that influence the way the future unfolds. And I try to be very observant nowadays and very careful of myself and what other people do, and and try to think of scenarios unfolding before they happen, and try to think of what may happen in this situation, how it may unfold. But you really never know. You can never predict that someone's going to try to kill you at 2 in the afternoon on a Sunday. Whether it's your family or friends or a stranger, you can never fully be inside the head of someone else. So you can never fully know what's causing someone to do what they do or say what they say. And I think a situation like this can make it incredibly challenging to be forgiving, because whereas your mind is telling you, after years and years of practice, let this go, forget about it. It's very fortunate that you weren't hurt and that no one was hurt, but let it go. Let it go and forgive this man and move on. Sometimes your heart will say, that too much has been cast on me by this person. Too much has been caused. This person has intruded on my life, and I want something back for that. I came to a point at which I did track this individual down, and after searching his name on Facebook several times, I came upon a page, and it was a memorial page for this individual. He had passed away about a year and a half after, or a year and a few months after this accident. And that's when a lot of emotional confusion built further for me. I looked further and looked at some of these posts, and something I've never felt before was just a mix of simultaneous hatred and heartbreak over someone. I've had individuals in my family deal with mental health issues at times, but it was later found out that this man had taken his life. He had jumped off a bridge in the Niagara region, and seeing all this outpour of emotion from his family members and friends on this memorial page really broke my heart and really caused two different mentalities of mine to clash. Empathy for someone who had clearly suffered a lot in their life, and at no point is that an excuse to try to inflict harm on others, but I do understand. I can never fully understand what he went through or what he'd been through, but I've known several people who have dealt with severe mental health issues, and if that was the case and that's what drove him to end his life, I feel for the man, you know, despite what he tried to do to myself, my family, what he did do to us. I still don't think that, you know, looking back, I think that a lot of the vengeful feelings I had towards him were irrational and unjustified, and I wish the best for his family, and just, you know, you never know. You never know what someone else is going through, and you never know what can happen in the course of a day. Is it the arrogant thing to do, to show up and say, I was a victim of your son's actions, but I forgive him. I am sure he was a good man, and I pray for him. I know that he suffered a lot. I don't know. Is that a self-righteous thing to do? Is that an arrogant thing to do? But I feel for his family, and I've definitely considered contacting them in the past, in the hopes that if they haven't received closure from some of the issues that he dealt with, maybe that could help them. I don't know. You can never be aware of what's going to happen fully, but I try to maybe sometimes remind myself that I can't predict what's going to happen, so I should protect myself as best as possible and protect those around me as best as possible. You just have to, you know, live your life in a good way, because you never know. I mean, as much as you expect to have a routine existence and for things to be, you know, we live in a very safe part of the world, and we live in a very comfortable part of the world, but you really got to appreciate it moments as they pass, because you never know. You can be driving around on a Sunday afternoon and someone might try to kill you. So you really got to appreciate every day as it passes. And that's cheesy as hell. It's the cheesiest fucking thing you can say, but I mean, there's a cliche, and then there's living a scenario that reinforces that cliche, and that's what I've gone through. Well, you always have to feel for people who suffer in any way. You know, whether it's self-inflicted or whether it's inflicted by things they can't control. But you know, my heart definitely goes out to them, and I can imagine that losing him was very difficult for all of them. So if I were to sit down with them today or tomorrow or whenever and speak with them, I would just, as respectfully and as carefully and tastefully as possible, say, this is who I am. You know, I crossed paths with your son one day several years ago, and you know, I don't know what information you have of the car accident that he was in on this given day, but I was in the other vehicle, and I know that, you know, I don't know if there were legal ramifications for your son after that, criminal ramifications, but I've heard of his passing recently, and I just want you to know that you know, as someone who was a lot, you know, in the trajectory of a lot of the issues that he dealt with and a lot of the fallout from that, you know, I forgive him for what he did. I forgive him for what he did, and a lot of hate went through me, but he was a human being just like anybody else who had a lot of baggage, a lot of suffering, and a lot of things going through his heart and through his mind, and what he went through, I wouldn't wish upon anyone, just how I wouldn't wish for anyone to go through what I went through. There was a time in which I did wish things upon him, but that's behind me, and I'm very, very upset to hear that he's passed away. You know, for someone to die young, it's always a tragedy, and no matter what he did to me, those are things that can't be changed. It's a miracle that no one in my car was harmed, and it's also, you know, I'm also very glad that he wasn't injured in this accident, at least not severely. But I forgive him, and and I just wanted you to know that, and I hope that that can, you know, that can provide you with some comfort. I don't know if I ever will be able to be a good driver. I don't know if I ever will be able to be a comfortable driver, and that worries me, because as someone who is not fully comfortable or fully confident behind the wheel, I know that I can be putting people at risk by being in that state. So I don't know if I'm meant to drive. Maybe it's fate. Maybe something's trying to tell me that I just shouldn't do it. And then, you know, maybe there's a lot of harm coming my way or coming in the way of others around me if I drive frequently. I don't know, but I don't know if I'll ever be comfortable behind the wheel of a car to the extent that someone else may be.